Does your blast beat sound like a typewriter? Or does it sound like a drummer? If your programmed drums sound like that first example, you're making the static velocity mistake. It's the #1 reason why home recorded metal tracks sound like demos instead of records. Today, I'm going to show you exactly how to fix the machine gun effect in 3 steps, so your programmed drums actually sound human. This right here is what I call the red line of death. When you click in MIDI notes with your mouse, most DAWs default the velocity to 127, the maximum volume. The problem is, even the heaviest hitters in metal do not hit a drum at 100% force, perfectly on the grid, 800 times in a row. Physics doesn't allow it. When you leave your velocities flat at the top, you're triggering the exact same sample layer at the exact same volume continuously. That's why it sounds like a machine gun. To fix this, we need to stop thinking like a programmer and start thinking like a drummer. Step 1 is the 80-20 rule. You rarely want your main hits to be at 127. Save 127 for the hardest accent in a breakdown, the shot that needs to sound like a gunshot. For everything else, your main backbeat, bring that velocity down to a range of about 100 to 115. I'm going to randomize these snare velocities just slightly. Now, instead of triggering the same top sample layer every time, the sampler is triggering slightly different layers. The snare will sound different on every hit. This creates movement. Let me play this section with the snare hits randomized, and then I'll play it with everything at 127, so you can hear the difference on the snare. For ghost notes and fills, you want to drop the velocities down drastically. A ghost note should be somewhere down in the 40 to 60 range. For blast beats, you're going to want the snare velocity somewhere between 80 and 95. I'm going to go ahead and drop these blast beat snare hits down to about 90 or 95 or so. And I'll play for you first with the snare at 127, and then again with it dropped down so you could hear the difference. So step 2 is we're going to stop worshiping the grid. Let me zoom in here so you can see. Quantizing everything 100% to the grid creates a sterile, lifeless feel. We want tight, not robotic. If you have a heavy breakdown, you could try grabbing your snare hits and dragging them just a few milliseconds behind the grid line, like this. This will create a lazy or dragged feel that makes the riff sound wider and heavier. Now, most DAWs have a humanize function that does this automatically. Use it. Even a 2 to 5% variation in timing is enough to trick the listener's ear into thinking a human played it. So I highlighted the blast beat section we were listening to earlier, and I'm going to hit the hotkey for the auto humanize on the MIDI in Reaper, and we're going to adjust the timing to be about 5%. This is a fast tempo song, so I'll set it at like 5%. If it was a slower tempo song, I'd probably get the timing closer to 2%. So it's a little bit tighter. But I'm going to hit OK, and I'm going to zoom in, and you'll see that now things aren't perfectly to the grid. You can see like where that snare and kick, it no longer perfectly lines up. Just that little bit of variation is enough to make the drum performance sound that much more human. So step 3 is check your round robin settings. Now, round robin simply means that if you hit the snare at a velocity of 100 twice in a row, the plugin will use 2 different audio files so it doesn't sound like a repeated sample. Make sure this is turned on in your sampler settings. If you've done the velocity randomization from step 1 correctly, this usually handles itself, but double check. I'll show you an example here on Easy Drummer. If I preview the snare with the humanize button turned off, it's going to trigger the exact same sample over and over again when I hit it, like this. Now I'll engage the humanize. And you could hear how it varied the actual audio file they used to trigger the snare sample, even though it's at the same velocity. So you just want to make sure that you have that engaged on whatever drum sampler you're using. So let's check out the results. I'm going to play the full track first with all the MIDI set at the static velocity and 100% quantization, and then I'll play with the same MIDI, but the velocity randomized and the humanized timing. It's the same notes, the same drum tones, but one sounds like a robot and the other sounds like a record. Now look, programming drums like this takes time. It's tedious. You have to go in and tweak every single fill to get it right. If you're a guitarist who just wants to write riffs and you hate staring at a MIDI grid, let me handle it for you. I offer full mixing and production services. You send me your raw MIDI and DI tracks, and I'll replace your drums with my samples and humanize them so they sound like a real drummer played on your record. There's a link in the description to my portfolio and a way to contact me. Let's make your record sound heavy. If you've got your drums sorted, but your bass guitars disappear in the mix, watch this video next where I show you how to dial in an aggressive metal bass tone.